Hi everyone, welcome to my channel KnowledgeSmritis. In our yesterday's video on TCS, we covered some basic things around the applicability of TCS on sale of goods, in which we discussed as to who is liable to collect TCS, what are the various thresholds for the applicability of TCS for buyer and seller, when and at what rate TCS needs to be collected from the buyer, when TCS needs to be deposited to the government, and when TCS returns needs to be filed. In our today's video, we will be covering all the practical aspects and practical difficulties faced by the assessees around the applicability of this section. Let's move to the presentation to discuss all practical aspects in more detail. We will start the today's discussion by analyzing the turnover threshold for the seller. As per the provisions of this section, any seller who has a turnover of more than 10 crore in last financial year will be eligible to collect TCS under the provisions of this section. Let's read it through the example. Whether a seller who had a turnover of rupees 15 crore in financial year 1920 and projected to have a turnover of 7 crore in financial year 2021, whether such person is liable to collect TCS for financial year 2021. Yes, as per the provisions of this section, seller will be eligible to collect TCS as the turnover for the last financial year has exceeded rupees 10 crore. Next question is whether the seller who had a turnover of 7 crore in financial year 1920 and projected to have a turnover of 15 crore in 2021, whether such seller is liable to collect TCS under the provisions of this section. Our answer is no, as the sales in the preceding financial year has not exceeded 10 crore, hence the seller is not liable to collect TCS. In the next two questions, we will see the situation where the seller or the buyer has more than one line of business. In this situation, we will be analyzing how we need to calculate the threshold of 10 crore for seller and 50 lakh for buyer. Whether we need to club the turnover of all the businesses, or do we need to analyze each line of business separately for the purpose of calculating TCS on sale of goods. The question is where a seller has more than one line of business and for each line of business there is a separate books of accounts, then how do we need to apply a turnover limit of 10 crore? As per law, seller means a person whose total sales or turnover from business carried on by him exceeds rupees 10 crore. From this, we understand that total sales or turnover of a business carried on by assessee under one PAN which exceeds rupees 10 crore in last financial year shall be considered for the purpose of applying this section. Next question is where the seller receives the consideration of sale from the same buyer for different lines of business for which he maintains a separate books of accounts, whether the limit of sale consideration from buyer shall apply independently for each line of business. The answer is if the seller receives a consideration from the buyer for value which exceeds rupees 50 lakh rupees in aggregate during the financial year from all the lines of business, then the provisions of this section shall apply. In the next question, we will analyze whether a seller will need to charge the TCS on sale invoice and add it to the value of invoice like we do for GST. The answer would be no. The levy under section 206C1H is not a levy on sale. It's a mode of recovery of income tax on sale of goods made by the seller to the buyer. As per the practice followed in the industry, it is advisable that invoice should state in terms and conditions that if the aggregate purchases made by the buyer exceeds rupees 50 lakh during the financial year, in that case buyer shall pay TCS at the rate of 0.1% along with sales consideration in excess of rupees 50 lakh during the financial year. In case the buyer does not remit the amount of TCS, the seller will first adjust the amount of remittance against TCS and the remaining remittance will be applied against sale. As we know, the provisions of this section are applicable with effect from 1st October 2020. In the next question, we will be analyzing the aggregate sale consideration for buyer which exceeds rupees 50 lakh shall be considered from 1st April 2020 or from 1st October 2020. As per our understanding, the aggregate sale consideration which is mentioned in the section is mentioned for the previous year. So to our understanding, for the purpose of calculating the limit of rupees 50 lakh for buyer, ideally the assessee should consider the turnover starting from 1st April 2020 and analyze it for the whole financial year. So the aggregate sale consideration is prescribed for the previous year. Even though the law came in effect on 1st October, to avoid unnecessary dispute, it is advisable that the buyer from whom the aggregate sale consideration received has already exceeded rupees 50 lakh on or before 30th September, the seller shall collect TCS on sale consideration received on or after 1st October 2020. In the other case, if the sale consideration from the buyer has not exceeded rupees 50 lakh before 30th September 2020, it is advisable to collect TCS on sale consideration at the time of receipt whenever the amount exceeds rupees 50 lakh. Please note, for this financial year 2021, rate of TCS is 0.075% instead of 0.1%. In the next question, we will be discussing what is included in the sale consideration, whether we need to charge the TCS only on the amount of sale or we need to charge the TCS on the amount of invoice value, which is inclusive of GST or any other levies or other charges. So the answer is the charging section specifies any amount as consideration for sale of goods. The charging section does not specify that TCS is applicable on sale value or the price of good. So in our opinion, it is better to collect TCS on the entire invoice value, which includes the taxes, duties, and any other levy. What we discussed so far, TCS is applicable on sale of good, and the seller is liable to collect TCS from the buyer on sale of goods when the aggregate value of sale consideration in the previous year exceeds rupees 50 lakh. In the next question, we will be analyzing the application of provision of this section in case the advance is received from buyer towards sale consideration. The answer is seller will collect the TCS at the time of receipt of amount from buyer. It does not matter whether the amount is received as an advance or after sale. What matters is if the aggregate value of sale consideration during the previous year exceeds rupees 50 lakh or not. So we can conclude that if whether the payment is received in advance or after sale, TCS is applicable if the aggregate value of sale consideration during the previous year exceeds rupees 50 lakh. In the next question, we will be analyzing whether a contractor is liable to collect TCS under the provisions of this section, where in case of works contracts, TDS is already deducted in section 194C. We will be analyzing this question in two situations. Situation 1, where in case of work contract, invoice is raised together for both supply of goods and services, and situation 2, where in case of works contract, invoice is raised separately for supply of goods and supply of services. The answer to situation 1, where invoice is raised uh, for supply of goods and services together. In that case, TDS may be deducted by the contractee on the whole value of invoice under section 194C, and TCS under section 206C1H shall not be applicable. Answer to situation 2, where invoice is raised separately for supply of goods and supply of services. In that case, TDS may be deducted by the contractee under section 194C for supply of services, and tax must be collected by the contractor under section 206C1H on sale of goods. In the next question, we will be discussing another practical aspect which is related to payment of TCS collected under this section on NSDL website. After the introduction of this section, many assessees were having the doubt relating to which code they need to select while making the payment of TCS collected under this section. Below is the screenshot which is taken from the NSDL website. And while making the payment of TCS collected under this section, assessees will need to select 6CR TCS on sale of goods as nature for making the payment of TCS under this section. With this, we have covered all the practical aspect and practical challenges faced by the assessees around the applicability of TCS on sale of good covered under section 206C1H. In our next video, we will be covering 8 practical illustrations where we will be analyzing the sales made by the assessee, the amount received by the seller before 30th of September and after 30th of September, and will be practically computing the amount of TCS payable under this section. I hope you liked the video. Stay connected with us for more informative content. Signing off till then. Bye bye.